Till now, we have seen that aggressive nationalism was fueling throughout Europe, and there was a mindless race for acquiring more colonies. All this was creating an environment of fierce competition and mutual enmity in Europe, and therefore all these nations were arming themselves to the teeth. Now, these nations realize that in unity lies strength, and so like minded European nations are coming together and forming alliances through the employment of secret diplomatic negotiations. Now, this division and all the other situations could easily be avoided if there existed an international organization to ensure world peace and to maintain international cooperation. But unfortunately, as we saw, there was a lack of such an organization. So, as far as the division of Europe was concerned, we saw that Europe got divided into two camps, led by two alliances. We see that Germany, Austria Hungary, and Italy are coming together to form the Triple Alliance. But on the other hand, we also remember how Great Britain, France, and Russia are coming together to form the Triple Entente. Now, these two alliances are trying to get more and more neutral countries, or those countries who have not selected a side before the war, to their side by enticing them with the promises of the victories of the war. Now, in this context, suddenly a very small region tucked away in Eastern Europe called the Balkans, right over here, becomes very important. Now, believe it or not, the First World War did not start off in Germany, in France, in Great Britain. It actually started off from the Balkans. So, the Balkans were the launch pad of the First World War. Yeah. Now, let us dive deeper into this small Eastern European region and find out exactly how did the Balkans lead to the First World War. Since we have now analyzed the many socio political and economic causes which caused the First World War, we will now focus entirely upon a few events and crises that led to a disastrous war. In this discussion, our focus will primarily remain on the Balkans and the Balkan problem itself, as this is where the First World War would be triggered. Now, the Bosnian crisis and the two subsequent Balkan wars led to the ultimate incident at Sarajevo. So, this entire cause can be considered as a precondition to understanding the immediate cause of the First World War. Therefore, collectively, this is also called the Balkan problem. And let us see if we can understand and decipher this problem known as the Balkans. Now, the Balkans were also called the powder keg of Europe or the fuse of all conflicts. The powder keg means an entire barrel of gunpowder. Therefore, meaning that the Balkans were an extremely unstable and volatile region in Europe. So, don't you want to know exactly what led the Balkans to earn this name? So, let us now try to understand what the Balkan problem is. And before doing that, let's also understand what the Balkans actually are. Situated on a peninsula in Eastern Europe, the Balkans are sandwiched by four major seas. We have the Black Sea, the Adriatic Sea, the Aegean Sea, and over here we also have the Mediterranean Sea. So therefore, the Balkans was a landmass situated in Eastern Europe, surrounded by water bodies on all three sides. Now, the instability in the Balkans caused extreme tension among the European nations and eventually led to the First World War. So, now that we have understood the basic geography of the Balkan region, let's see who the Balkan nations are. So, the Balkans refer to a cluster of nations in Eastern Europe, as I mentioned, and this cluster of nations right over here, you see that the Russian Empire is right over here to its east, the Austrian-Hungarian Empire is towards its north, and the Ottoman Empire lies towards its south. So we mention a cluster of nations. Let's see what these nations are. So the cluster of nations which the Balkans comprise of are including countries like Greece, Macedonia, Serbia. You also have Bosnia and Herzegovina and many, many other nations. So this is what the Balkans are. Now, at the beginning of the 20th century, the Balkan region was less populated and significantly underdeveloped in comparison to Western Europe. The Balkans had a few natural resources and therefore was not really an economic powerhouse. But despite that, all the other European nations wanted to control the Balkan region. Can you wonder why? Well, the Balkans had to its advantage its strategic geographical location. The Balkans also had access to four major water bodies of Europe, and therefore, any nation who can control the Balkans has effective passageway to all these four water bodies. And finally, since three major empires are surrounding the Balkans, any of these nations, if it can control the Balkans, would also have more advantage in gaining the territories of the other empires. So collectively, the Balkans were the golden prize for Eastern Europe. Any person or any nation which can control the Balkans can control Eastern Europe itself. But since the Balkans was the golden prize of Eastern Europe, there were too many competitors as well. All these other European nations are actually fighting amongst each other in their own manners to gain more control over the Balkans. They're waiting till the other power loses its grip over the Balkans, and all this is causing a sense of political instability and aggression in the Balkan region itself. And this is eventually causing the First World War. So, therefore, we see that the Balkans are considered as a cause of the First World War due to its strategic importance to other European powers. So the Balkan powers and the situation they are existing in is forming the Balkan problem, as we will discuss now. For centuries, the Balkans was effectively under the control of the Ottoman Empire. But with the Ottoman Empire's decline, there was a disintegration of sorts in the region, as this region suddenly has many previously Ottoman occupied provinces gaining independence, and these provinces now want to form their own independent states. And this is causing a sense of instability, a sense of disintegration in the region. To add to this, the Balkan region was also politically unstable because there were many ethnicities in the Balkan region. Now, since these provinces centered around one or two ethnicities are gaining independence, these ethnicities are now forming their own aggressive nationalism. And this aggressive nationalism is causing conflict among the Balkan nations as well. And we see such aggressive nationalism portrayed in Serbia and Serbia's dream of a united Slavic state. So the region was also politically unstable as there were different ethnicities and rising nationalism, especially in the case of Serbia. So we saw the geography of the Balkan region, its history, and also realized how important the region was to other European nations. We also traced that the region itself is an unstable one due to its disintegration and also the ethnicities and the rising nationalism that existed within the region. Now that we have understood the overview of the Balkans, we can dive deeper into exactly what the Balkan problem was. Now, before we move on, can you answer this question? The Balkans is a region that is situated in, is it Western Europe? Is it in Africa? Is it in Eastern Europe? Or is it in Asia? The correct answer is that the Balkans are situated in Eastern Europe. So now we will start discussing the first element of the Balkan problem, the Bosnian crisis. So, as already mentioned, the decline of the Ottoman Empire was leading to the rise of independent states or provinces in the Balkan region. These were previously Ottoman occupied provinces, but since the Ottoman Empire's influence in the region is declining, these provinces are gaining independence and they're forming their own states. Now, if you look closely into the map, the area marked in red is the land lost by the Ottoman Empire between the years 1600 and 1878. So, therefore, before the start of the 20th century itself, the Ottoman Empire had lost key areas in Eastern Europe, including that in the Balkans. Now, the provinces under Ottoman Empire in this region is gaining independence and forming states of its own. But the Ottoman decline in the region is leaving behind a power vacuum that is being filled by the other major European powers, such as that of Austria Hungary. Now, these recently independent provinces in the Balkan regions are weak, and therefore it's easier for the major European nations to come and overpower them. And that is exactly what we see with Austria Hungary over here having its eyes set on the Balkan region. So we see that Austria Hungary did not waste much time and it claimed two previously Ottoman controlled Balkan provinces, that of Bosnia and Herzegovina, as its own in the year 1908. So in this illustration we see Austrian soldiers stepping over the province of Bosnia-Herzegovina, claiming it as its own. But this move by Austria-Hungary was not unchallenged. We see Serbia, which is a Balkan power situated right over here, is connected to Bosnia-Herzegovina ethnically, historically, and geographically. And Serbia has this dream of a united Slavic state. And the Slavs are the population of the majority of the Balkan regions. And in Serbia and Bosnia-Herzegovina, we see a majority of Slavic population. Now, Serbia wanted to unite all these Slavic states together. But this move by Austria-Hungary was a direct opposition to this. And therefore, Bosnia-Herzegovina is countering the claim made by Austria-Hungary and is claiming the provinces as its own. So therefore we see that Serbia, a Balkan nation, is claiming the Bosnia and Herzegovina provinces as its own. Now, do you think that Austria-Hungary simply handed over these territories to Serbia? On the contrary, it announced that it would launch an invasion on Serbia if it does not back away from its claims. Now, Serbia, having no other option, turned to its ally Russia. Russia was the country with the largest Slavic population and therefore jumped into this conflict to save its ally Serbia. Now, this brought Russia directly in conflict with Austria-Hungary in the capacity of protecting Serbia from the attack of Austria. So, the severe international tension caused by this situation is what we know as the Bosnian crisis. Now, in this illustration, we see that the Russian postcard is depicting Russia as the big brother of the region, and where it is disciplining Austria-Hungary over here for creating instability in the Balkan region. Next, we will see that Austria-Hungary would be allying itself with Bulgaria, which was a Balkan nation which had a clash with Serbia. So what we see in the Bosnian crisis is how a regional conflict is bringing two transnational empires, namely the Austrian-Hungarian Empire and the Russian Empire, face to face in a conflict. So let us now look at this illustration that was published in the French magazine, which best depicts the Bosnian crisis. Over here we see that the Ottoman Sultan is looking over its lost territories in Eastern Europe, while Austria-Hungary is busy occupying Bosnia and Herzegovina. At the same time, we also see the Bulgarian Tsar is gaining independence for his own province of Bulgaria. So this is the situation that we see at the very beginning of the Bosnian crisis. So the severe international tension caused by this situation which we just discussed is known as the Bosnian crisis, in which we see how Austria-Hungary is getting into a sort of crisis with Serbia, and Serbia has the support of Russia, which is bringing Russia directly in conflict with Austria Hungary. So, Serbia wanted to achieve its long standing dream of a united Slavic state and also gain an access to the Aegean Sea. While Austria Hungary was adamant on holding on to these two territories of Bosnia and Herzegovina. This only meant one thing: war. Not the First World War yet, but a series of battles that took place in the Balkan region, which is often known as the Balkan Wars. And that is exactly what we will discuss as the second half of the Balkan problem. Now we see the second part of the Balkan problem, which were the Balkan Wars that lasted between 1912 and 1930. So we start by discussing the First Balkan War. Continuing our story from the Bosnian crisis, we saw how a war was looming over the Balkan region due to the tension created by Austria-Hungary and Serbia. Now, in the year 1912, the Balkan region consisted of the following countries: Bosnia-Herzegovina, right over here; Serbia, which is present over here; Bulgaria, right next to Serbia; Montenegro, which is a small nation situated next to the Adriatic Sea over here; Romania, to the north of Serbia and Bulgaria; Greece, as we all know, near the Mediterranean; Albania is present next to Montenegro; and finally, Macedonia, the home of Alexander, right over here next to Greece. Now, over here in the map, we can see that some regions are still occupied by the Ottoman Empire. But the Ottoman Empire's influence in the region was declining. And this decline had its ultimate blow in the year 1912 when Ottoman Empire faced a humiliating defeat at the hands of the Italians. Following this defeat of the Ottoman Empire, we see that some Balkan states have the idea of coming together to form a league of sorts. So therefore we see that the Balkan states of Serbia, Bulgaria, Montenegro and Greece are forming an alliance of their own, and this alliance is known as the Balkan League. It was formed in the year 1912. Now, the Balkan League was formed to promote the strength of the Balkan nations against much more powerful world powers such as the Ottoman Empire and the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. So this alliance aimed to free the remaining Balkan nations which were still under the occupation of other powers in this region and also achieve a complete partition from the Turkish Empire and also remain allied against the other European powers with wishes to control the Balkan region. So it was a sort of a resistance against the major European powers to form a sense of unification in the Balkan region. And that's exactly what the Balkan League wanted to do. So we see in this illustration that the Balkan League is being depicted, and we can identify the nations by their respective flags. And we see also that the Balkan nations or the Balkan League nations are being blessed by the gods above, and they have the assent of the gods to move ahead in their aims and ambitions. But the problem with alliances of this time is it eventually leads to war. And that's exactly what we see at the Balkan League is doing. So we see that with the Turkish defeat at the hands of the Italians, the Balkan League felt that this is the correct time to launch an attack on the Ottoman Turkish Empire. So over here we see that the Balkan League is now about to go face to face with the Ottoman Empire. So thus the League declared war on a recently weakened Ottoman Turkey in the year 1912. The reason this situation was selected was because Ottoman Turkey was going through its own crisis after being defeated at the hands of the Italians. So in this illustration we see League nations are defeating and beating up a weakened and powerless Ottoman Sultan in the form of a Turkish dragon. So this declaration of war on the Ottoman Turkish Empire led to a series of battles being fought between 1912 and 1913, and this is known as the First Balkan War. This led to the Turkish defeat, and it led to the Balkan League taking over all the European possessions of the Ottoman Turkish Empire. So this League of Balkan nations had happened to defeat a major transnational empire like that of the Ottoman Turkish. As you can see in this picture, wounded and weakened Ottoman soldiers are being led away from the battlefield after their distinct defeat at the hands of the Balkan League soldiers. So over here we are presented with a very different map of the Balkans after the First Balkan War, as we no longer see the Ottoman Empire's control in the Balkans in the regions which it previously controlled. So what we see is that in the Balkan War's defeat, the Ottoman Turkish are losing their complete control over all European territories, and these territories are being distributed amongst the Balkan League nations, which are Serbia, Bulgaria, Montenegro and Greece. However, all was not well among the Balkan League powers after their victory in the First Balkan War. Bulgaria felt dissatisfied after the war, as it felt it had not gained as much it expected and therefore felt cheated. As I previously mentioned, that the Balkan League nations had distributed the previously Ottoman controlled regions amongst themselves. This is when Bulgaria felt that it should not have allied with the rival nation of Serbia, as Serbia and Bulgaria had a long-standing conflict amongst themselves, which they had kept aside to form the Balkan League. But now Bulgaria regrets the decision. So what we see is a rising conflict among the nations of Romania, Bulgaria, Greece and Serbia. And this will lead to Bulgaria attacking its own previous allies Serbia and Greece in the year 1913, thus breaking out the Second Balkan War exactly 1 year after the first. So over here we see that now there is an alliance of sorts between Romania, a new entry, Serbia, Montenegro and Greece, and they're all going to fight Bulgaria since it had raised its discontentment regarding the distribution of the spoils of war and had chosen to attack its own previous allies Serbia and Greece. Now Bulgaria, which is over here, is surrounded by the enemies it's about to fight. Can you guess what happened? The Second Balkan War ended in Bulgaria's defeat, and this defeat left the entire region unstable. In this picture over here, we see that right before the conflict started, the Greek and Bulgarian soldiers were standing right next to each other, protecting a common port city. But when Bulgaria decided to declare the war, it declared war against its own ally Greece. And this is something the other Balkan nations could not take well. And thus Bulgaria was ostracized by the other Balkan nations after its defeat. And this entire situation of instability, discontentment and mutual conflict is leading for a much bigger conflict into the area. Now, the Second Balkan War could be depicted through this satirical representation where Bulgaria is saying that you cannot defeat me, while Greece and Serbia are actually agreeing, saying that I know, but he can. And then comes up Russia. In this depiction, we see the role played by Russia in the Second Balkan War as well. Russia was chasing its own intentions and was trying to grab a stronghold in the Balkan region. And therefore, it was continuously helping Serbia in its pursuit to be the strongest Balkan nation. Now, while Serbia became the most powerful nation in the region, Bulgaria, on the other hand, was reduced to a local power trying to reclaim its lost glory and pride, and also the territories which were taken away from it after its defeat in the Second Balkan War. Now, this would lead Bulgaria to follow the old rule of war. The enemy of an enemy is a friend. And we will see Bulgaria joining hands with Austria-Hungary, which is a rival of Serbia. And this would only bring the First World War closer. So by now you must have understood what the Balkans are, its geographical location and its historical relevance. Now with the shift of power in the region, we saw how independent states were rising up, all equally ambitious. At first they came together to counter the rising expansion of bigger European powers such as that of the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the Ottoman Turkish Empire. But soon these nations are ending up in conflict with themselves. Now, such conflicts are leading to mutual enmity and a division of the region. And this release you'll also find in the Balkans itself through the immediate cause of the war, the topic of our next discussion. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. You can also register for free at deltastep.com or download the DeltaStep app to learn one-to-one with our amazing teachers or to get access to all our 5,000 plus amazing videos as per your school syllabus. Master each topic with our adaptive practice technology. Get million plus questions with step-by-step solutions and unlimited mock tests. Get all your doubts resolved instantly. Learn via games and win amazing prizes like PlayStations and iPads. So at DeltaStep, learning is not just fun and easy, it is rewarding too. So register for free now.